My name is Travis Lawrence. I'm a printmaker. I am based out of the rural Midwest. The Garden is a series that I created starting between August 11th, 2021 through October 19th, 2024. It's a series of 35 hand-carved relief prints that were inspired during this timeline. The prints is a traditional method that I've been working in for the last well over 15 years now. It's a process where you take a block, traditionally it was wood, other materials can be used, and you essentially carve it like a stamp. And once the block is carved, you apply a layer of ink and run it through the traditional press. This is a old art, and my creations pay a homage to much of the traditional imagery found in the early years of printmaking. You know, the traditional woodcuts that you would see in, religious material, Bibles, and even into the more alchemical manuscripts and writings. The content that I work with also shares along the similar vein as well, working through this encrypted allegorical style of communicating visual artwork. The alchemists were notorious for this for several reasons. One, essentially to keep the information that they were sharing arcane and hidden, in a sense, rather than blatantly giving, say, a set of instructions or something along those lines. They used symbolism as a encrypted way of transmitting these ideas to where one that receives this material really must learn the art in order to actually perform the instructions of the material. Alchemy was a very complex, philosophical, practical, devotional art. So while I may not be necessarily creating alchemical acts based upon the traditional methods associated with the idea of transmutation of materials, But for myself, the art making is the alchemical process. So whereas I might not be actually in a laboratory mixing chemicals, I am with my own hands in spiritual intent pouring in the work to create something that I believe is divinely inspired and giving it a life in this material object. So during the same time that I was working on this series that I've titled The Garden, I was doing a lot of just personal writing with it as well. So at all times, I always carry like a little small sketchbook in my pocket at all times. And this is mostly just traditionally just to have access to something to where once an idea comes, I need to release it in some way, or it's like a dream, you just forget it. So the visuals come, they get scribbled down, but also writing comes. The visual and the writing may not be directly referencing one another sometimes, but they do have a relationship. And oftentimes this is where like some of the titles have come from. Sometimes it's me just exploring this idea of what the image was, or I'm just still like relishing in the mind state of what accompanies these visions. I don't normally share this stuff. I don't normally share the writings. It's usually it's a very personal documentation. I've got stacks of these notebooks that I've collected over the years that I'm the only one that's ever seen them, and honestly, probably the majority of them, it's going to remain that way. But for the garden, something in me, I was compelled to share this material with it as well. So the title The Garden came pretty early on in this series. Even before I really knew exactly what was happening and what this series was, I began calling it The Garden. And I believe it came from a quote from John Portage, who was a philosopher, theologian, mystic, heavily influenced by Jacob Boehme. And during this time, I was reading a lot of Jacob Boehme, who was a German mystic. He was just a common shoemaker, laborer. He wasn't anyone special or out of the ordinary. He just began having these divine visions and just these mystical, ecstatic experiences, and would just write and write and write. Reading his material, it isn't easy, and I can't even fully say that I understand what he's talking about. I can tell you that while reading his stuff, it puts me in a space. It's like an altered state of mind, and if anything, reading it is the same way as how one should have a response when reading any sort of like devotional, sacred text. like artwork, it connects you with divinity, with God. His concepts such as like the way of the heart, and in his exploration of Sophia, which is a lesser known aspect in the Christian tradition of recognizing the wisdom of God. So there's a lot of those ideas that I was exploring and opening myself up to during the same time frame. And it is reflective, I would say, in the artwork that I was making for the garden. So during these 3 years of me creating this body of work, it was also me trying to understand this idea that I was working with. Like, I knew that this was going to be called the garden, because so much of what I was creating and working with was around this idea of a garden. And so what is a garden? Okay, we all know what a garden is. A garden is where you create a space, and within this space you are going to grow something. So the first thing you do with a garden is you create the space. This is the space. And it's sacred. It's holy because you have separated it. That's part of what the meaning of holy is to separate. Because there's a recognition of this being something more than that. So you created this space with full intent of something happened specifically in this. So, and you go into the garden and you cultivate it and you nourish it and you give with the potential intent of also receiving. And what is it that you're going to receive? Well, what you receive depends on what you put forth into it. The devotion. So the more devotion that you offer, the more you've opened yourself up to allow this growth to occur. But there's also things that occur, but there's also things that happen in the garden too, which you have to be mindful of, because there's going to be intruders that will try to enter your space, and you have to protect it. You have to keep it holy. And yeah, this obviously there's a reference to the classic idea of, the Garden Eden, which was a place outside of this world. Because that's what you're going into whenever you're going into this spiritual practice, is you are exiting this world. You're going to something beyond this. When you enter this sacred space, you're no longer in a space. So the garden isn't even a place. It's not a physical location. It's not even a state of mind or a tangible experience. These are probably also the closest descriptions for trying to understand something beyond comprehension, while also not being something.